Hermione Granger and the Chamber of Secrets. Chapter 4. At Flourish and Blotts Again. It took 2 whole days for Ron to respond to Hermione about what had happened. Thankfully for Ron, Ginny had already filled her in. Had Ginny not sent her a letter, Hermione was quite certain she would have been on the first bus to Devon to track down the burrow and find out for herself, which would not have boded well for Ron. According to Jeanie, her father, Arthur, had been tinkering around with a muggle car and figured out how to make it fly. The twins, along with Ron, flew the light blue Ford Anglia across the English countryside to the Dursleys' home in Little Winging in the middle of the night. There, they decided it was a perfectly acceptable idea. It was not. To attach the car to the bars on Harry's window and pull him out through there. Hermione was so flabbergasted no one was hurt, maimed, or expelled in the adventure that it barely even registered how horrible it was that the Dursleys had put bars on Harry's bedroom windows to keep him inside. The realization of the horrible conditions Harry must have been subjected to over the summer finally hit Hermione on the long bus ride. Granger's station wagon didn't seem up for another trip to London an early Wednesday morning. As she had mentioned in her letter to Ron, the Grangers were going back to Diagon Alley to get all of Hermione's school books and equipment for her second year, and she planned on meeting up with them that day. She couldn't even fathom what it must have been like for Harry to live in those conditions. Hermione did know one thing for sure. Harry probably couldn't wait to return to Hogwarts, just as Hermione couldn't as well. The escape plan drama took up so much of her thoughts that Hermione almost didn't realize that she hadn't received her second-year list from Hogwarts. However, like magic, as soon as Hermione realized information hadn't arrived, a school owl tapped on the window with a bulky envelope in its beak. Within the envelope were 2 pieces of parchment. On the first, Dear Miss Granger, please note that the new school year will begin on September the 1st. The Hogwarts Express will leave from King's Cross Station platform 9 and 3/4 at 11 o'clock. A list of books for next year is enclosed. Yours sincerely, Professor M. McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Hermione smiled. She couldn't wait to see Professor McGonagall again. Hermione's greatest surprise, however, came with the second sheet of paper beneath the Hogwarts crest. Second-year students will require the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2, by Miranda Goshawk. Break with a Banshee by Gilderoy Lockhart. Gadding with Gowls by Gilderoy Lockhart. Holiday with Hags by Gilderoy Lockhart. Travels with Trolls by Gilderoy Lockhart. Voyages with Vampires by Gilderoy Lockhart. Wanderings with Werewolves by Gilderoy Lockhart. Near with the Yeti by Gilderoy Lockhart. Hermione had been trying to come up with a justification to ask her parents to buy her all of Gilderoy Lockhart's books, and this was the perfect reason why. Obviously, whoever they found to be this year's Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher was, rightfully so, a Gilderoy Lockhart fan. Hermione was so excited to learn more about her hero and the techniques he used against all of the foes he fought. Gilderoy Lockhart was undoubtedly all the rage around London, and Hermione couldn't wait to be included in the fun, especially with her friends by her side. Since Ron couldn't be trusted to come up with any sort of well-developed plan, Hermione and Ginny had been planning on when and where to meet. The plan was for the Grangers to go to Gringotts to exchange some money first, and then catch up with the Weasleys to get the books. However, Hermione suspected it would make much more sense to meet at Gringotts, since everyone would have to get money out. But Ginny was pretty adamant about meeting at Flourish and Blotts. Hermione suspected Ginny was embarrassed at the Weasleys' lack of wealth and didn't want Hermione to see anything potentially embarrassing at the bank. Hermione didn't care one bit about how many galleons the Weasleys had. She was just excited to see them all, especially her new friend Ginny. As the Grangers walked down Diagon Alley towards Gringotts, her excitement grew and grew. It was much busier than the last time they had been here, probably because it was almost time for school. As they walked up the snow-white marble steps, Hermione's heart soared. It was almost too much. Hermione turned briefly to look out over Diagon Alley from her higher vantage point on the steps, mostly so she could catch her breath and calm her heart for a beat or two. Unfortunately, once she looked out over Diagon Alley, there was to be absolutely no chance for her heartbeat to return to normal. A few meters away, there was the unmistakable towering groundskeeper of Hogwarts, Hagrid, walking through the crowds. There was no mistaking his wiry brown hair and his gigantic frame. He towered over all of the other wizards and witches by a few feet at the very least. And there, next to Hagrid, was a small mess of dark brown hair bouncing along. It was Harry. Hermione would know that mop of hair anywhere. Harry, Harry, over here, she called and bounced down the steps. I'll meet you inside, she called over her shoulders to her parents. She knew they wouldn't dare venture very far in the wizarding world without her as a guide. They were always so anxious when it came to anything magical, but they'd be okay in Gringotts. Harry must have heard her calling to him because he looked up and grinned. Hermione's heart soared. She tried to assess him and the situation as she flew down the steps to greet them. The first thing Hermione noticed about him was how incredibly skinny he looked. The Dursleys mustn't have fed him well over the summer holiday. The second thing Hermione noticed about Harry was wildly disheveled. His glasses were broken, and he was covered in soot. What happened to your glasses? Oh, hello, Hagrid. Oh, it's wonderful to see you again. Are you coming into Gringotts, Harry? She said, slightly out of breath. There was just so much to say, but she had to catch her breath first. Her mind was going a million miles a minute. As soon as I found the Weasleys, said Harry. Hermione was confused. Wasn't that who he came with to Diagon Alley? She was just about to ask, but Hagrid beat her to it. You won't have to wait long, Harry said with a grin. Hermione spun round and saw Ron, Fred, George, Percy, and Mr. Weasley sprinting up the crowded street. There was no question it was them. Their fiery red hair glowed in the early morning sun. Before Hermione could say hello, Mr. Weasley ran over to Harry. Harry, he panted. We hoped you'd only gone one grade too far. He mopped his brow with the green and orange polka dot kerchief. Molly's frantic. She's coming now. Where did you come out? Ron asked, causing Hermione to whip her attention back to him. She was trying to figure out what the fuss was and not succeeding. Everyone was talking so fast. Nocturne Alley, said Hagrid grimly. Excellent, said Fred and George together. We've never been allowed in, said Ron enviously. I should really well think not, growled Hagrid. Oh, Harry, oh, my dear, you could have been anywhere, came another voice from behind where Hermione was standing. She spun again and saw Molly Weasley gasping for breath. Next to her was a short girl of 11 with bright red hair and a smattering of freckles. Ginny. Hermione gave her a huge smile, which Ginny returned shyly. Mrs. Weasley pulled a large clothes brush out of her bag and began sweeping off the soot covering Harry's clothes. Mr. Weasley took Harry's glasses, gave them a tap of his wand, and returned them, good as new. Almost as if she was listening on a delay, Mrs. Weasley stopped brushing Harry abruptly. Nocturne Alley? She cried, and turned to Hagrid. If you hadn't found him, Hagrid. She grabbed Hagrid's hand in shock. Hermione could tell Hagrid was uncomfortable with the display of gratitude as he tried to slip from her grasp as carefully as a giant could. Well, gotta be off, he said, finally breaking free of Mrs. Weasley. Dear Hogwarts. And he strode away. head and shoulders taller than anyone else in the packed street. As the group said their goodbyes to Hagrid, Hermione took a few steps to stand next to Ginny. With a giant wink, she thrust her hand to Ginny. Part of their plan was to pretend they didn't know each other. You must be Ronald's sister, Ginevra. Ginny, she said with a wink of her own. And you must be Hermione. Nice to meet you, Hermione said with a smile. She was about to continue the facade as the group started to walk up the bank's gray white steps, but was interrupted by Harry, who had snuck up behind her. Guess who I saw in Borgin and Burke's? Harry asked. Malfoy and his father. Draco Malfoy was a particularly annoying Slytherin student at Hogwarts, who seemed to make it his sole ambition in life to bully Hermione, Harry, and Ron ferociously. Draco thought he was better than everyone else because he was rich. Hermione couldn't stand him. He was a selfish prat who was also not very smart. Did Lucius Malfoy buy anything? Said Mr. Weasley sharply behind them. By his tone, Hermione concluded Mr. Weasley couldn't stand the Malfoys either. No, he was selling. So he's worried, said Mr. Weasley with grim satisfaction. Oh, I love to get Lucius Malfoy for something. Mr. Weasley worked for the ministry. You must be careful, Arthur, said Mrs. Weasley sharply as they were bowed into the bank by a goblin at the door. That family's trouble. Don't go biting off more than you can chew. So you don't think I'm a match for Lucius Malfoy? Said Mr. Weasley indignantly. But he was distracted almost at once by the sight of Hermione's parents. The Grangers were standing nervously at the counter that ran all along the grand marble hall, waiting for Hermione to introduce them. She saw their eyes light up at the sight of her and immediately felt terrible for leaving them. She led the Weasleys and Harry over to them. Mr. Weasley was so excited to see them. You're Muggles, said Mr. Weasley delightedly. We must have a drink. What's that you've got there? Oh, you're changing Muggle money. Molly, look! He pointed excitedly at the 10-pound notes in Bert's hands. Hermione could tell Bert was utterly overwhelmed and tried to ease their discomfort. Mr. Weasley was completely harmless, but absolutely obsessed with all things Muggle. Mom, Dad, you remember Mr. and Mrs. Weasley? She said. Oh, yeah, of course, Bert said stiffly, holding onto the notes. Mr. Weasley works at the Ministry of Magic in the Misuse of Muggles Artifact Department. He just finds our Muggle money fascinating, Hermione continued, as calmly as she could, trying to subtly explain why Mr. Weasley was so fascinated with her parents. Mary was able to force a smile through her discomfort. Ah, yes, we find most everything in the wizarding world fascinating as well, she said. Hermione was so proud of her for trying. She went over to her mom and gave her a hand a squeeze. Mrs. Weasley opened her arms wide and started to push all of her children and husband toward a goblin, ready to take them to their vaults beneath the bank. Let's go, dear. We can't do anything without money. Right, said Mr. Weasley excitedly over his shoulder. We have to go down to our vaults, but let's get that drink when we're done. Meet you back here, Ron said to Hermione as he rolled his eyes. Hermione watched the group disappear behind the door. She turned and smiled at her parents. They're a little overwhelming, but they mean well, she assured them. I remember them from the Hogwarts Express, Mary said. Mrs. Weasley had helped Bert and Mary figure out how to get back to Muggle World from platform 9 3/4 when Hermione first went to Hogwarts. Wonderful, nice people, just eccentric. That's definitely one way of putting it, Hermione laughed. The Grangers queued in the line marked Muggle Exchange area by a large sign gilded in gold. Below it was the following. 1 nut is equal to 0.04 pounds or 0.05 euro. There are 29 nuts to a sickle. One sickle is equal to 1.17 pounds or 1.5 euro. There are 17 sickles to a galleon. 1 galleon is equal to 20 pounds or 25.5 euro, subject to current Muggle exchange rates. Finally, a goblin with grey tufts of hair and a shiny gold monocle called the Grangers up to the counter. "How much are you exchanging?" he asked with a bored and lazy tone. "Oh," Bert said, fumbling with his wallet and the odd number of notes in his hand. "How much did it go again last year, Hermione?" "About £3,000, she answered guiltily. "But it may be a bit more this year with the book list. They're all books by Gilderoy Lockhart, and they're kind of pricey." She felt terrible her parents had to pay so much money, but there wasn't much she could do about it. She tried to justify it by comparing it to the absorbent cost it would be for her to study abroad, though her justification didn't help much. £3,500, Bert said to the goblin and placed a combination of notes and a check on the counter. The goblin pushed a stack of coins back almost immediately. Hermione could tell Bert wasn't expecting the coins so quickly by the way he nearly knocked over the piles when he jumped back. The ease and speed in which those in the wizarding world could operate were definitely hard to get used to for a Muggle. It took Hermione quite a few weeks of school to not be startled. "Oh, thank you," Bert said, looking at the large stacks without a clue as to what to do with them. Hermione stepped up to the counter with her bag and started sweeping the pile inside. Once she collected all of the coins, she ushered her parents outside to wait for Harry and the Weasleys. She hoped being outside would be a little less overwhelming for them. After a few minutes of people watching, which never got old, the Grangers noticed the Weasleys and Harry emerging from the set of burnished bronze doors. Hermione waved to get their attention, and they all rushed over to them. Before Hermione could run interference, Mr. Weasley had his arm around Bert and was walking in the direction of the leaky cauldron. "Would love to buy you that drink if you have time," Hermione heard Mr. Weasley say over the din of the crowd. Bert looked back over his shoulders at Hermione and Mary with what could only be described as "help me" eyes. "I should probably tag along," Mary said with a small chuckle. "Are you okay if I go with them?" "I think that's a good idea," Hermione said, and gave Mary's hand another little squeeze. Mary started after her husband and Mr. Weasley towards the leaky cauldron. Everyone else in the group began to splinter off all at once. "I need some more quills," Percy, one of Ron's older brother and a Gryffindor prefect, mumbled, but strangely started in the direction opposite of amanuensis quill. Fred and George also broke away from the group toward quality Quidditch supplies in hopes of finding their fellow Gryffindor Lee Jordan. "We'll all meet at Flourish and Blotts in an hour to buy your school books," said Mrs. Weasley, setting off with Ginny. "And not one step down Nocturne Alley," she shouted at the twins retreating back. Hermione knew Ginny didn't want to go with her mom, but there was nothing Hermione could do without giving away their secret correspondence. Besides, Ginny needed to get her first-year robes, whereas Hermione still fit in her ones from last year. Hermione set off with Harry and John along the winding cobbled street. It was wonderful just being with them, walking around in the magical town. It took everything Hermione had not to start asking a million questions of her two best friends, as they seemed to want to walk in silence. But after about a minute, she couldn't control herself. "I simply cannot wait another second," she blurted out. "What happened this summer? Harry, why didn't you write me back? Ron, what happened when you went to Harry's uncle's house?" Hermione almost missed the eye roll Ron gave Harry, but caught it at the last minute. "Don't you roll your eyes at me, Ronald Weasley. It's not my fault you didn't feel the need to keep me updated all summer." "Blimey, Hermione, calm down, will you?" Ron said. "I will not calm down, Ron," Hermione said. She was starting to get angry and could feel the anxiety begin to rise within her. "I was alone all summer, without any news of why Harry wasn't replying to my letters. The least you could—" About that, Harry interrupted her. I had no idea you were writing to me. Honest, I never got a single letter. Well, that makes absolutely no sense because Hermione started, but Harry put up a hand. Turns out all of my mail was being taken before I could see it, he said. Hermione gasped. Your aunt and uncle? Harry shook his head. No, actually, though I bet they'd have it if they could. No, a house elf named Dobby stole my mail all summer. A house elf? Hermione asked. Why would a house elf take Harry's mail? Yeah, I guess Dobby doesn't want me to go back to Hogwarts, so he stole all of my mail. So I think you lot didn't care about me. That's positively bizarre, Hermione said. Oh, tell me about it, Harry said as they entered Florian Fortescue ice cream parlor. He said he worked for the Malfoys and heard them say that I'd be in danger if I returned to Hogwarts. So he tried to keep me from going. What kind of danger? Hermione gasped. He wouldn't tell me. Malfoy probably put him up to it. Doesn't matter though. I'm going back to Hogwarts no matter what, he replied. He reached the counter. Hi, yes. Can I have 3 strawberry and peanut butter ice creams? Harry asked the clerk. Harry, you should really tell someone, Hermione whispered loudly as Harry passed her ice cream cone to her. The last thing she wanted was another year full of danger. Had they only told a teacher last year, things would have been much different and much less dangerous. See? Told you she'd say that, Ron joked. Hermione flashed him an angry look. It's fine, Hermione, Harry said. Nothing is going to happen, I promise. They continued to slurp their ice cream cones as they wandered around Diagon Alley. Hermione's mind couldn't help but continuously whirl around, trying to make sense of Dobby's warning. What kind of danger could Harry be in? Did it involve he who must not be named again? The ball of nerves was getting bigger and bigger. Hermione could hardly focus. Ron was gazing longingly at a full set of Quidditch robes in the windows of Quality Quidditch Supplies, when Hermione realized they were right next to amanuensis quills. Hermione dragged Ron and Harry inside. She knew a new, fresh set of parchment and quills would make herself feel better, and she was right, as usual. After getting a beautiful maroon and gold quill and a pack of 1,000 sheets of parchment, Hermione felt slightly better. The 3 friends went into Campbell and Jape's Wizarding Joke Shop. There they met Fred, George, and Lee Jordan, who were stocking up on Dr. Filibuster's fabulous wet start, no-hit fireworks. Hermione knew they were stocking up for a school year full of pranks and shook her head at the thought. A little further down the alley was a tiny junk shop full of broken wands, loop-sided brass scales, and old cloaks covered in potion stains. Hermione had never been inside. There they found Percy, deeply immersed in a small and profoundly boring book called Prefects Who Gained Power, a study of Hogwarts prefects and their later careers. Ron read aloud off the back cover. That sounds fascinating. Go away, Percy snapped. Of course, he's very ambitious, Percy. He's got it all planned out. He wants to be the Minister of Magic, Ron told Harry and Hermione in an undertone as they walked back out into the cobblestone street. Hermione, unlike Harry and Ron, didn't mind Percy. She immensely admired his ambition and quest for knowledge, and secretly shared his aspirations of becoming Minister of Magic. An hour later, they headed for Flourish and Blotts to meet up with the rest of the group. Hermione remembered the last time she was at Flourish and Blotts, and how the clerk made her feel with a ball of nerves in her stomach. She knew it wouldn't happen on this trip now that she was with Harry and Ron. With them, Hermione felt as though she could do and be anything. Nonetheless, the memory still was excruciating, and she could feel her anxiety rise with every step. They were by no means the only ones making their way to the bookshop, As they approached it, to their surprise, they saw a large crowd jostling outside the doors trying to get in. A large banner stretched across the upper windows. Gilderoy Lockhart will be signing copies of his autobiography, Magical Me, today, 12:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. We can actually meet him, Hermione squealed. I mean, he's written almost the whole book list. Her heart was beating out of her chest. Any undesirable thought or ball of anxiety Hermione had been thinking or feeling immediately vanished. She couldn't believe she was going to see him in person. The crowd seemed to be made up mostly of witches around Mrs. Weasley's age. Hermione spotted the clerk who had been so rude standing at the door, saying, "Calmly, please, ladies, don't push. There, mind the books now." She was sure to give him a dirty look as she squeezed inside with Harry and Ron, but realized seeing the rude witch didn't bother her at all. In just a few seconds, Hermione was going to see the man who helped her survive the summer. Plus, she was with Harry and Ron. Nothing could ruin the excitement she was feeling at that moment. A long line wound right to the back of the shop, where Gilderoy Lockhart was signing his books, in all his bravery and glory. Harry and Ron each grabbed a copy of the Standard Book of Spells Grade 2. Luckily for Hermione, Harry grabbed her one as well and handed it to her. She wasn't even paying attention. The three of them sneaked up to the line to where the rest of the Weasleys were standing with Mr. and Mrs. Granger. "Oh, there you are. Good," said Mrs. Weasley. She sounded breathless and kept patting her hair. "We'll be able to see him in a minute." Hermione squeezed in between her parents and Ginny and tried extremely hard not to jump up and down with glee. Ginny looked like she was doing the same. As they slowly moved up in the queue, Gilderoy Lockhart came slowly into view. He was seated at a table surrounded by all of his books. He was wearing robes of forget-me-not blue that exactly matched his eyes. His pointed wizard's hat was set at a jaunty angle on his wavy hair. Hermione's breath caught in her throat, and she could feel her face flush. She was even more flustered than when she saw Finnegan or Marius. Gilderoy was perfect, even in person. A short, irritable-looking man danced around taking photographs with a large black camera that emitted purple smoke puffs with every blinding flash. "Out of the way there," he snarled at Ron, moving back to get a better shot. "This is for the Daily Prophet." "Big deal," said Ron, rubbing his foot where the photographer had stepped on it. Gilderoy Lockhart heard him and looked up. Hermione gasped. Then he leaped to his feet and positively shouted, "It can't be Harry Potter!" The crowd parted, whispering excitedly. Lockhart dived forward, seizing Harry's arm, and pulled him to the front. In the process, he brushed Hermione's arm. She gasped again, touching the very spot in awe. She knew she was being slightly irrational, but she didn't care. Gilderoy Lockhart touched her arm. The crowd burst into applause, snapping Hermione out of her trance. She joined them enthusiastically. She watched Harry go to the front and start shaking Lockhart's hand as he smiled for the photographer, who was clicking away madly, wafting thick smoke over Hermione and the Weasleys. "Oi!" said Ron, trying to wave the smoke away. "Bugger this. I'm just going to get my books. You want me to grab yours too, Hermione?" Hermione was so enamored with being so close to Lockhart that she didn't even realize Ron had asked her to do something nice for her. She nodded absent-mindedly before Ron stormed away. She didn't even notice him leave, however. Her eyes were locked on Lockhart. "Nice big smile, Harry," said Lockhart through his gleaming teeth. "Together, you and I are worth the front page." When he finally let go of Harry's hand, Lockhart threw an arm around his shoulder and clamped him tightly to his side. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said thunderously, waving for quiet. "What an extraordinary moment this is. The perfect moment for me to make a little announcement I've been sitting on for some time. When young Harry here stepped into Flourish and Blotts today, he only wanted to buy my autobiography, which I shall be happy to present him now, free of charge. The crowd applauded again. He had no idea, Lockhart continued, giving Harry a little shake that made his glass slip to the end of his nose, that he would shortly be getting much, much more than my book, Magical Me. He and his schoolmates will in fact be getting the real Magical Me. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I have great pleasure and pride in announcing that this summer I will be taking up the post of defense against the dark art teacher at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Hermione didn't even try this time. She and Ginny grabbed each other's hands and started jumping up and down in delight. They nearly knocked over Ginny's new, to her, cauldron she had set at her feet. Hermione was basically in shock. Could it possibly be true? Gilderoy Lockhart was going to teach her at Hogwarts? The crowd cheered and clapped as Lockhart presented Harry with the entire work of Gilderoy Lockhart. Staggering slightly under their weight, he managed to make his way out of the limelight to the edge of the room, back to where Hermione and Ginny were still giggling like excited little schoolgirls, which they were. You can have these, Mary mumbled to Ginny, tipping the books into the cauldron. I'll buy my own. Bet you loved that, didn't you, Potter? Said a voice Hermione had no trouble recognizing. Her excitement faltered. Famous Harry Potter, said Malfoy. Can't even go into a bookshop without making the front page. Leave him alone. He didn't want all that, said Ginny. She was glaring at Malfoy. Hermione joined her in her dirty look. Potter, you've got yourself a girlfriend, drawled Malfoy. Ginny went scarlet. All of a sudden, Ron was next to them. Oh, it's you, said Ron, looking at Malfoy as if he was something unpleasant on the sole of his shoe. Bet you're surprised to see Harry here, huh? Not as surprised as I am to see you in a shop, Weasley, retorted Malfoy. I suppose your parents will go hungry for a month to pay for all those. Draco pointed to the two sets of books Ron was carrying. Ron's face went as red as Ginny's did. He dropped his books into the cauldron and started towards Malfoy, but Harry and Hermione grabbed the back of his jacket. Ron, said Mr. Weasley, struggling over with Fred and George. What are you doing? It's too crowded in here. Let's go outside. Well, Arthur Weasley, came a slithering voice. That snake-like voice had to belong to Mr. Malfoy, Draco's father. There was no denying the family resemblance. With his platinum blonde hair, the sneering wizard stood with his hand smugly on his son's shoulders. Lucius, said Mr. Weasley, nodding coldly. Visit time at the ministry, I hear, said Mr. Malfoy. All those rides. I hope they're paying you overtime. He reached into Ginny's cauldron and extracted from amid the glossy Lockhart books an ancient, very battered copy of A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration Ginny must have grabbed at the same second-hand shop she had purchased the cauldron. Obviously not, Mr. Malfoy said. Dear me, what's the use of being a disgrace to the name of wizard if they don't even pay you well for it? Mr. Weasley flushed darker than either Ron or Ginny. We have a very different idea of what disgraces the name of wizards, Malfoy, he said. Clearly, said Mr. Malfoy. Hermione watched in absolute horror and disgust as his pale eyes flicked over to where her parents stood. The company you keep, Weasley, and I thought your family could sing no lower. Hermione was just about to lay into Mr. Malfoy when there was a thud of metal. Ginny's cauldron went flying. Mr. Weasley had thrown himself at Mr. Malfoy, knocking him backward into a bookshelf. Hermione backed up towards her parents as dozens of heavy spellbooks came thundering down on all of their heads. There was a yell of, "Get him, Dad!" from Fred or George. Mrs. Weasley was shrieking, "No, Arthur, no!" The crowd stampeded backward, knocking more shelves over. "Gentlemen, please, please!" cried one of the other clerks, and then louder than all, "Break it up there! Gents, break it up!" Harry was wading towards them through the sea of books. Hagrid was wading toward them through the sea of books. In an instant, he had pulled Mr. Weasley and Mr. Malfoy apart. Mr. Weasley had a cut lip, and Mr. Malfoy had been hit in the eye by an encyclopedia of toadstools. He was still holding Ginny's old Transfiguration book. He thrust it at her, his eyes glittering with malice. "Here, girl, take your book. It's the best your father can give you." Pulling himself out of Hagrid's grip, he beckoned to Draco and swept from the shop. "Yeah, you should have ignored him, Arthur," said Hagrid, almost lifting Mr. Weasley off his feet as he straightened his robes. "Rotten to the core, the whole family. Everyone knows that. No Malfoy's worth listening to. Bad blood, that's what it is. Come on now, let's get out of here." The assistant looked as though he wanted to stop them from leaving, but he barely came up to Hagrid's waist and seemed to think better of it. They hurried up the street, the Grangers shaking with fright, and Mrs. Weasley beside herself with fury. Hermione tried to calm them down to no avail. Both Bert and Mary looked like they were about to pass out from fright. The only thing Hermione could think of was to get them as far away from Flourish and Blotts as possible. As they followed the group, Hermione could hear Mrs. Weasley's shrill voice. "A fine example to set for your children. Brawling in public. What Gilderoy Lockhart must have thought." "He was pleased," said Fred. "Didn't you hear him as we were leaving? He was asking that bloke from the Daily Prophet if he'd be able to work the fight into the report. Said it was all publicity." Hermione shook her head. She doubted Gilderoy would do something so selfish. She turned her attention back to her parents. They seemed to have started to calm down a bit since they started walking. "I'm sorry," Hermione said near tears. "Are you sure you're okay?" "We're fine," said Mary, though her voice was still a bit shaky. "We've had our fair share of brawls," Bert added with a lopsided grin, though Hermione could still sense his unease. As the motley group reached the leaky cauldron, it was time to say goodbye. The Weasleys and Harry were going to use the Flu network to return to the Burrow, and the Grangers were going to catch the next bus back to Lavenham. Hopefully, Harry wouldn't mispronounce the name of his destination as he had when they had arrived in Diagon Alley. Hermione had learned that was why Harry was covered in soot when she first saw him. He had accidentally sent himself to Nocturne Alley instead of Diagon Alley. Finally, it was time to say goodbye. Hermione was holding back tears. She didn't want to say goodbye to her friends, but was comforted in the fact they'd be together again soon enough at Hogwarts. And, she reminded herself, so she wouldn't tear up, Gilderoy Lockhart would be at Hogwarts waiting for us.